Can you be funny for me, Mulch?
No.
Do a little hat dance. What have you learned from the fool? Tell me one of the 55 prescribed jokes.
Hi, friends. This is the Ankh-Morpork Historians Guild, and we are reviewing Wyrd Sisters, which is the first good one. I'm Mulch.
Good one.
It's the first good one.
I'm Mulch.
It's the first great one.
I am Mulch. I use they, them pronouns.
I'm Curtis, and I use they, them pronouns as well.
I'm Chio. I use she, her. And
it's the first good one.
I would like to be clear, I have...
Everything else is worse now that I've read this one.
During the period during which I was not, or between the year or so between this and the last episode, I've been reading a bunch of novels that are not written by Terry Pratchett. And let me tell you, the worst Terry Pratchett book, the worst one we've read so far, I would class it among the good books that I read that weren't by Terry Pratchett.
No, Sorcery is not a good book at all.
Yeah, actually, I was about to say.
Others.
Maybe the others. But, we said that.
Sorcery, I can't, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Books are bad. That's why I don't read them anymore. I read exclusively fan fiction. Books are bad.
Wow, this is a hardline stance I didn't expect you to take on this public podcast.
But... Terry Pratchett books most of them are good.
It's true.
Right.
We've said it every episode. The majority of his works are head and shoulders above almost everything else.
You do realize that Sorcery isn't my least favorite, right?
I know. Well, fuck you.
Read so far.
You're wrong.
Yeah, you are wrong. I'm sorry, but you're fucking wrong because that shit was so bad. It was making me physically sweat to listen to the book.
Yeah. It was so upsetting.
Everything about it was wrong. And your argument of I could make up a fictional different story that would have been good is a great argument, except that it doesn't make any sense and it's still a bad book.
Curtis, you and I have very different ideas about story and character ideas, I think.
Yeah, but this book was just bad.
It was just really bad.
It was really bad.
Okay, but we can't talk. We did an entire hour and a half about how bad Sorcery is.
Yes. That was our longest episode yet about how bad Sorcery is. But let's talk about the good one.
It's really great. Mm. It's not just good. It's great.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
It is. There are parts of this that are so perfect they blow my mind.
God, just every. I don't know which parts of this book are my favorites. I know the most enjoyable parts are all the parts with the three witches having any interaction, except for that one time Granny Weatherwax slut shamed Nanny Ogg. But other than that,
she always all of the parts slut shamed Nanny Ogg.
That's very in keeping with who Granny Weatherwax is.
Oh yeah, no, it's completely in character. I don't think there's a single moment where I feel that Granny does something that does not mesh with her character.
Yeah.
My least favorite parts with the three witches weren't the Nanny Ogg slut shaming. It was the weird occasional rape jokes where the punchline involves the idea that Magrat does not understand sex.
Yeah, that was weirdness with Macbeth in that.
Those were easily my least favorite bits.
How old is McGrath?
I think
I don't know.
Because I really couldn't tell at some point. So I don't remember if they said. Because if she's 17, the jokes are still weird, but they're at least sensical. But I kept imagining her as kind of our age, 22, 23.
Yeah, same.
And it makes them significantly worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think, like, the idea of referencing a sexual assault and then having the punchline being that this one character doesn't get a sex reference is like...
No, it's bad. No, don't get me wrong. It's bad no matter what. It makes it worse if they're, like, constantly infantilizing her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if she's 16, 16's, they genuinely don't know anything.
I mean, I just assumed that she was an adult for some reason.
Well,
But he often considers 16 and 17-year-olds to be adults.
Well,
as we have encountered when he married off every 17-year-old he's ever written.
Yeah. No, what she did, at least, well, I like that they didn't give us her age because we can just imagine whatever's most convenient to us personally.
Fair enough. Good choice. Good choice. A headcanoner's choice.
That she was in, like, her 30s in Witches Abroad, which is the next book in the series.
See, I assume she's the exact same age in Witches Abroad as she is here.
Oh, no, I think she's definitely older in Witches Abroad.
Because she's still... she's like fucking... They mentioned that she's just left the apprenticeship again. The same woman dies.
Oh.
In Witches Abroad, the same woman dies again, and she's still leaving her apprenticeship.
Okay, so she is the same age. She totally is.
Wait, that's weird. That's real weird.
I mean, he doesn't give a shit about... He doesn't give a shit about... He doesn't give a shit
about continuity.
Yeah.
Which is good. Which is the right choice.
Turning really quick to the... So, this is one of, like the King-Fool duo, the scenes with them were had such a feel to them. Like, they were really impactful to me personally, and, like, in a kind of, like, scary way.
The King's descent.
It's weird because I feel like the King and the Fool were really interesting characters, and I think the Duchess was such a weak point to this book. I found her the weakest point to this book in general.
I was really excited
because she doesn't have a character.
She really feels like
she has, like, you can see the hints of him wanting to make her a character a little bit, but she just isn't. She just isn't anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
She absolutely feels like that same callback to those. I'm a super ambitious woman who is therefore unredeemably evil. Shit. Oh, good. Shit. Mulch can't hear us, and that's why Mulch is interrupting you really intensely.
Oh, sorry. I just started being able to hear you again.
Hype. That's okay. Your point was good.
Okay. What were you saying?
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you agree that's an ongoing theme with the ambition is evil? I think she's certainly a lot...
Not ambition is evil. Ambition in women is evil.
Where ambitious women are demonized. But I think she is a much stronger character than, say, any of the female characters in The Color of Magic.
I do agree. Well, I think he takes the idea further, because I do like that line that we get to with her, where I know what I am. You showed me myself. I don't care.
Really great scene.
That was killer, and that's like the one point where I'm saying like he actually wanted this to be a character, but that's the only time you spend with her, really.
Yeah.
That's not from the King's perspective, and like you just don't have anything to her until that moment, and like I really wish he'd fleshed her out.
I do too. I understand why he couldn't though, because it just. The book was so packed tightly, I don't see where he could have fit it. So I feel like this is one of those books where he started writing with one concept and he got really derailed from that original concept. And there are those kinds of things in the book where you can kind of tell that had happened. I think it is a good trait in Terry Pratchett, though. as it's something that we see him do and pull off a lot of times in his writing, like Acumen, where he really gets off track from his original idea, and all it does is improve it, because we get to spend more wonderful time with these characters doing what these characters genuinely would do. Like, does this book need a scene where they go to a dwarf boar? No, it doesn't. He finds a way to make it useful. He finds a way to make it paint these characters, but this whole book could be written without it.
That Neil Gaiman quote about how Terry Pratchett's novels tick along like Swiss watches with no where everything fits together perfectly.
Yeah.
This is the first book in Discworld that we've read so far that really applies to.
Yeah, I totally feel that. Everything just works so well. Every single one of these characters, I feel like I understood.
So much little setup and payoff. Like, even tiny things. Like, in one of the first early scenes, Granny Weatherwax says, "You'd have to be a fool to want to be a king."
Yeah.
That's so
That's
good.
really funny.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
All of the words. I mean, this is where the first book where he really talks about his total belief in the power of words and his true belief in the power of words. And he shows it to us in the way he writes this book. Not only does he talk about it in the book, but he shows us. Every word will call back. Anything that they say can become prophecy, which is both fate and disruption of fate. And it is perfect.
So good. Oh, can we, going back a little bit to Lady Velmet, the Duchess, in preparation for this episode, I went back and read Macbeth. I thought I'd read Macbeth already, but actually what it turns out, what I did was watch Throne of Blood and consume a lot of Macbeth via cultural osmosis.
Oh my god. Okay. It's very like you. That's very like you.
Like, Throne of Blood is a very accurate film. I mean, it is a very loyal film to Macbeth. But something that really struck me is that he basically took Macbeth and Lady Macbeth and combined them, where he gave a lot of he gave the most interesting, most tormented interpersonal scenes that Lady Macbeth has inside of the play, and sort of melded them together with the character of Macbeth. And Lady Velmet is the character who is left over.
Yeah,
take away the hand scrubbing, and gradual psychological deterioration.
Yeah, I mean, he really split them up into two characters. It's not how it is. It is an exaggeration of how it is in actual Macbeth, which I thought was really interesting. She is What?
No, I mean, he takes actual scenes that occur. For instance, the blood hand scrubbing stuff.
Yeah.
That was not Macbeth inside of the play Macbeth. That was Lady Macbeth. He literally takes, as the story progresses and the body counts rack up in Macbeth, and the crimes committed to retain power according to the prophecy, Lady Macbeth begins to have nightmares. She begins to sleepwalk, and she begins to get up and wash her hands in her sleep to try and wash off the stain of blood. Terry Pratchett takes that and gives that to Velmet for the Macbeth stand-in. He takes out the scenes where Macbeth chides Lady Macbeth to be stronger, to be ruthless, more cold-blooded. Where in the play they're basically egging each other on into greater and greater acts of bloodthirst and power hunger.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the play, whereas in Wyrd Sisters, it kind of goes all in one direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it does.
Absolutely.
So in the process, I think he makes a character who is more interesting than the original Macbeth. But he kind of leaves Lady Macbeth, or the Duchess, a shell of herself.
Well, yeah. So what
I mean, and the role that the Duchess plays is important, and like I feel like that the effect it had on the king was really interesting, and like the dynamics there were really interesting. I just wish she'd also been a character, or
Yeah, I agree with you with the Leftovers. What I feel like he was doing was trying to exaggerate both those traits, and he couldn't find a way to exaggerate them as the real characters that they are. So he split them off into two, the whole piece. One of them will be the savageness of the Macbeths, both of them, and the pushing each other and the ambition and desire. And one of them will be the madness, the sadness, the foolishness.
Mm-hmm.
And he just couldn't, it feels like he just couldn't find a way to make both of them do that. Right, so he just split it to exaggerate it, to make it more satirical. I think that he fails to realize like how he is calling back to these exact same earlier tropes, which we were criticizing earlier, in making that ambitious woman so evil and pushing all of that sympathetic nature onto the guy. This conniving, controlling woman could have been a good character, but because he's so committed to just doing this exaggeration and giving all of those ideas to just the king, it does fall flat. It is the thing that falls flat the most in this book. She is still charming in her devilish way, and she is still interesting, but...
and I think, like, a lot of... There's something very satisfying in the sort of, like, kind of flat way that she views the world. And I think there is... I think he does touch upon an element of truth there, even an imperfect truth, especially towards the end, where it is impossible, where in a way it's almost kind of sad, because people try to show her compassion. And there's a point where she is entirely in their power, but she does not register this, because to her, compassion and empathy are weakness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that there was a lot he could have done with that I would have loved to see.
I almost does not register that they don't view her as a threat anymore. That's the reason why they don't.
I mean, to the point of her death. To the point of her death.
Yeah, and
even in the forest when she dies, she's still screaming as if she has power and if she holds fear.
Yeah, and honestly, I just wish a few of the scenes with the king viewing her would have been from her perspective. I think that's all I would have needed with her. Like, just
I feel
like
that could
glimpse
have
into her mind.
Worse. I feel like that could have been worse.
It could have been worse. It depends on what it is. Because I think what I would have loved to see is the kind of sickness we think of with kings and queens, where they find themselves so above the rest of the world and so outside of it that they truly only care about power. They cannot understand anything else. And if he had gone that route and spent time in her mind, the peculiar way that she looks at the world through that lens, she could have been redeemed in that way. You know, we see glimpses of that. I know that I am evil. Do you think that I care? I am above that. Mm-hmm. That is powerful. That is an incredible concept that we'd love to see. But he doesn't
especially interesting because when because the scene is that Granny Weatherwax does her worst. She does her magic, which is she strips the mind of self-protective barriers of self-delusion and of the stories we tell ourselves to justify our behavior, or the compartmentalization, and just slams it all into her brain all at once. The interesting thing is, instead of just having Lady Velmet shrug it off or rendering her entirely comatose. She is initially shocked and thrown by it. And I find that very interesting. Where
where she is screaming at first, and then she's like...
We're not screaming. She's too shocked to even scream.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Man.
And the fact that I think it's in a way even more telling to the strength of her mind that after getting hit with that shock, she is able to reaccustom herself to that way of thinking so quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that we could benefit and enjoy very much going through each of the characters and talking about them. Because this book was the first example, I feel, where every single character felt so perfect.
Yeah.
Even Lady Velmet, who I have this disappointment in, she fit in the story. She ticked along with everything else in such a wonderful way.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is really, that's what he's best at. And this is the first book where I felt it. I mean, we saw the characterization start to come out in Equal Rights and in Sorcery. I will give it this credit. And now we're starting to see the full nature of that possibility of characterization. What makes Terry Pratchett so incredible, so amazing is that feeling of this super chaotic thing that you fully understand because you're right there with the characters in every sense of the word. So I'd love to keep going through the characters with y'all.
Yeah.
The primary characters. We should talk about Velmet.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Velmet is a very interesting character because throughout the entire story, he is falling apart in increasingly visible ways. But at the same time, there's a bit... Does anybody have the bit marked down where he confronts Granny Weatherwax? And she realized that he's not a vulnerable, falling apart man with a hard-edged shell. In fact, a falling apart, vulnerable man with a diamond hard core of will. Does anybody have that?
Or like
it marked down?
Like where she was like, there's like a core of sanity, of like cold sanity in him or something, like
battered into diamond. Yeah.
I don't have it marked down, but
pretty late. Yeah, and I think that's something that's very interesting. Is I don't think he actually has that all the way throughout. I think that's what's fascinating. I think that his insanity drew that out of him.
Yeah. And like he does have, like, during that scene he is very smart in that scene. And but he does kind of lose it. Like, cuz I mean he's very smart in that scene. He does know that he's figured out what witches are and what the rules are, and that they aren't allowed to like meddle in that sort of way. But he does lose that like when it gets into like telling the stories and how the stories work. I probably can't hear you guys again, but I'm going to keep talking. When it comes to like how the stories work, he loses it. He just falls apart. Like when you get to the play and the play being told, he's falling apart.
Yeah.
We were just listening to you. We could We weren't talking.
Okay.
Do we interrupt you so much that if we let you talk
that was
for
a bad
more...
sign.
Oh yeah, that is true. But it's even when the Fool first brings that up, that stories are like, and that was such a great scene where the Fool talks, like the first time the Fool is really participating in these plots is where the Fool is saying like, stories or like words are gonna get you out of this.
Let me see if I can find that scene as well.
I was about to say that scene is perfect.
That is a killer scene, and really, it's so true. Like who controls the narrative? That's who ends up on top. Like,
Oh, I found the quotation that we were just referencing earlier.
Oh, go ahead.
From Granny Weatherwax. She thought him weak under a thin shell of strength, but it went a lot further than that. Somewhere deep inside his mind, somewhere beyond the event horizon of rationality, the sheer pressure of insanity had hammered his madness into something harder than diamond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so that's what I was saying, that exists within him because of his insanity. He's been driven to such a point that he can withstand anything.
Yeah.
The quote from the Fool is, "The past is what people remember, and memories are words. Who knows how a king behaved 1,000 years ago? There's only recollection and stories."
Can you scroll a bit up and talk about the scene where he finds ways to rephrase political policy in a more appealing way, in an acceptable...
God, he has so many killer lines.
We'll talk about the Fool next.
Okay.
We'll talk about the Fool next, because I do really want to dive into Velmet. This idea of this... Because I think what's so fascinating about Velmet is that I felt an urge to hate him. I did feel hate for him, but he's so pitiful. He's so tragic, despite his intelligence, which is clear. He's the first to listen to the Fool and the first to understand that. And he is wise enough to understand that you have to play political. He doesn't share in Lady Velmet's belief that violence alone works.
Yeah.
It's one of his first lines is actually, "If we kill everybody, who will do that? Like, who will do the X thing?" I think that's so fascinating how well he writes this pitiful, weeping child of a king. And I just can't get myself to hate him. Even at the final point, I feel so much tragedy in this character that I don't know outside of his insanity, outside of his cruel acts. Usually when I see that kind of tragedy, it starts very much like Macbeth does. I start with a base part of this man and I can understand him. This has none of that. He descends so quickly into violent, cruel, and thoughtless acts that he's unjustifiable. Yeah. And yet, I'm charmed. In that strange way.
There's also an essential tragedy to his character, where his entire character motivation revolves around getting power and holding on to it. But it's a power he doesn't actually want. He is a king. He is the king of a kingdom that he finds intensely alienating and depressing. Populated by people he does not understand and kind of fears.
And he was happy before. This is something that I like.
And how it works.
He doesn't really desire
It's just he doesn't necessarily want it, and he hates where he is with it.
And I think that's one of the strengths of Wyrd Sisters as a whole, in a way. It is a story that takes one of the quintessential lives and deaths of kings type story. One that basically revolves around royal intrigue and where there's a certain horror in regicide. I mean, Macbeth is somewhat more complex of a story, where a somewhat more psychological story than is typical, I guess. But it is a story where a lot of the horror lies in regicide, and then kind of repositions. At the same time, I get the impression from Terry Pratchett's writing that he cannot justify the monarchy to himself. He does not believe in the monarchy and in the rights of kings. And so he has to find a way to reposition the story so that it is deeply wrong for Velmet to rule, and that it is just for the lost prince to become king. He has to write that in such a way that he can believe in it.
Yeah.
I feel like somewhere along the line, my line of reasoning became scrambled and incoherent.
Became a little confusing there. And I'm not sure if I agree with you. Terry Pratchett believes in kings. He doesn't believe in the rule of blood for kings, but he does believe deeply in kings. He believes in the philosopher king. His love for the patrician is the greatest example of this, but he does it a lot, actually, in his works.
That is true.
He does actually really respect a monarchy and what a monarchy can do, the type of power that wields it. He just also recognizes the truth that a king is nothing without his people. I mean, he recognizes revolution in that way. I think that's something that's very, 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 very British about him.
Yeah.
It's that he wants to believe in the good of kings desperately. He puts the philosophy of the good of kings in so many of his works. But he is also acutely and closely aware of how they fail.
I think it's more than just kings. Terry Pratchett loves politicians and politics, which makes him very unusual among writers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he loves bureaucrats. And it's something I vibe with, is I love bureaucrats.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be possible that I love bureaucrats because I was raised on Terry Pratchett books.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I have always felt that he hates bureaucrats, but that he can respect what they do. In his books, a lot of the time, the bureaucrats will finally become heroes by completely abandoning whatever position they had. It happens in the Watch books the most, but it happens in several of the other ones as well, which I think is very interesting.
I think that's something we'll have to come back to as it arises.
We absolutely will. It is unavoidable. In his work.
But going back to Velmet, there's this interesting thing where Velmet is racked with guilt over murdering King Varence. He finds it, and he is horrified. His worst fear is that everybody will look at him and see a murderer, see somebody who killed the former king, a usurper, a traitor, a backstabber. But nobody around him shares that belief or that feeling.
And it is really interesting to see that, because he is aware of that in some ways, in some points in the books. Like his perception of the people that he's ruling over just is very interesting, because he does get self-aware about it at some point, and then kind of loses that. But he does realize at some point that nobody cares, and they're not responding to this destruction or the lives taken exactly. They're just trying to live their own lives, and there is a point where he's aware of that. But he does completely lose it, as he...
and it almost distresses him.
He does not like it. He hates it.
He sees it as almost barbaric. But to them, it's kings kill kings every day. And I think that gets to part of what the core of this book is, which I really enjoyed, which is a reminder, almost from Terry Pratchett, that William Shakespeare was just a man, and most of his shows were made for common men. Having those scenes where Granny and Nanny and McGrath are watching the show is some of my favorite parts, because they don't understand it, and you get all of these perspectives in that. It is a reminder that these plays, these grand shows that we so often dream of in the modern day, were commoners' plays in many times and many places, or traveling shows.
Yeah. There's a whole historical conspiracy theory based around people being unable to accept that William Shakespeare was a commoner and not an aristocrat.
Yeah.
How could a commoner have created what is widely considered to be one of the greatest canons in English history?
Mm-hmm.
And coming up with these elaborate theories where somebody else must have written Shakespeare's play. Because he was just a commoner.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many stories like this and things like this. And it is such a great example of a writer who, he didn't get much acclaim until he suddenly got quite a lot. And he got to see some of that nonsensical imagery of him. I mean, look at his work. He's just a guy. And he was very happy and very comfortable being a guy. Just some dude. And he starts getting this acclaim, and this is the book he writes. A response to the acclaim that the greatest English writer of all time has. I think that's positively wonderful and absolutely core to the book.
This is the most British book he has written so far. This is the one that is most deeply rooted in British culture, and that never moves outside of Britain. And I think is stronger because of it.
Absolutely. I wholly agree with that. I think
is a running issue with a lot of the earlier Discworld books was that he would have these bits that would be set inside of Britain, and they would be excellent, and then he would move out of Britain and things would get real uncomfortable really fast.
Real racist, real fast.
Unavoidable.
Oh god. This is why I'm not excited for Pyramids. I'm not looking forward to it.
We'll see what
I
happens.
have uncomfortable memories of Pyramids.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about The Fool. Because I think that we cannot finish a talk.
So interesting.
We cannot finish a talk about Velmet without talking about The Fool.
Can I read the bit that I found?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the bit where he is the Duchess and the Duke are arguing about the best way to fix this problem. The problem of legitimacy and authority. And the Duke has taken his advice, and he said, "It works." He said, "The people mutter against the witches. How do you do it, fool?" And the fool responds, "Jokes, nuncle, and gossip. People are halfway ready to believe it anyway. Everyone respects the witches. The point is that no one actually likes them very much." And then moving along, the Duchess says, "It seems that words are extremely powerful." And wait. Sorry, I'm skimming, trying to find the right thing. He says, words can change the world. She says, so you have said before, I remain unconvinced. Strong men change the world. Strong men and their deeds. Words are just like marzipan in a cake. Of course you think words are important. You are weak. You have nothing else. And then he disagrees with, and this exchange takes place. Lady, the Duke wishes to chop down the forest, is that not? The trees talk about me, whispered Lord Velmet. I hear them whisper when I go riding. They tell lies about me. But, the fool continued, this policy has met with fanatical opposition. People don't like it. The Duchess, what does that matter? We rule they will do what we say or they will be pitilessly executed. Fool, but my love, we will run out of people, murmured the Duke. Sorry, that was the Duke, not the fool. The fool was busy trying to look very foolish so as not to get executed. No need, said the fool desperately. You don't have to do that at all. What you do is, you embark upon a far-reaching and ambitious plan to expand the agricultural industry, provide long-term employment in the sawmills, open new land for development, and reduce the scope for banditry. The Duke looks baffled. How will I do that? Chop down the forest. But you said... Shut up, Velmet, said the Duchess. She subjected the fool to another long stare. Exactly how, she said eventually, does one go about knocking over the houses of people one does not like? Urban clearance, said the fool. I was thinking of burning them down. Hygienic urban clearance. And sowing the ground with salt? Mary, I suspect that is hygienic urban clearance and a program of environmental improvement. It will be a good idea to plant a few trees as well. No more trees! Oh, it's all right. They won't survive. The important thing is to have planted them. And it goes on like this. And I think this is quite possibly one of the best things I have ever read. I love it.
Yeah. God. And the fool is so interesting because he's helping them do these terrible things in a very smart way. But he's such a sympathetic character. Like, you feel so bad for him.
Yeah.
Because his reason for helping is so justifiable. He lives by a code. It isn't a fool's place to judge regardless. And he tries within that code to nudge the proper way. He shows wisdom. He shows brilliant intelligence. And he does so over and over and over again. And he laments the code, but it is also the only thing he has, quite literally. His abusive past and his anxiety is so clear and so well written that him sticking to that code becomes insanely justifiable, even when he's helping them kill and chop trees and honestly ruin this kingdom to such an extent that the kingdom itself shows up to say, whoa!
I will say that I object to the help kill thing. He doesn't really help to kill as so much he helps to not kill.
Yeah, I mean they don't kill another person directly. They do talk about burning down houses with people inside of them quite a lot, and he does.
Yes, that is true. Never mind.
He does help out.
Yeah.
They actually talk about that like a really weird amount. Think a lot.
And just how casual it is, like it's not something anyone wants to do anything about. They're just gonna wait for another king. They're just gonna wait. This is just how it is. So they're gonna try to mind their own business. And
well, there is talk about maybe doing something about it. But I think there's a big thing where they assess the amount, how many of them would die if they were to go in and try and dethrone Helmet.
Mm-hmm.
And they conclude that it is not worth the body count. And the witches, to reduce the body count, the witches would have to interfere, and there is a big conflict about that.
Mm-hmm.
I truly
I'm specifically thinking of the scene where Nanny Ogg has been taken hostage, and Nanny Ogg is like the grandma to half the village, and to basically the entirety of Lancre. She is a major figure, and so her sons come out, and along with a bunch of other villagers, and they've got pitchforks, and they've got torches, and there's a very real possibility of bloody conflict. But Velmet has trained mercenaries. And so the body count would be enormous unless the witches interfere, but then whoever's on the throne will owe their kingship to the witches.
Yeah. They will. I mean, every time we see stuff like this, because I think it's more than just they will owe the kingship to the witches. They will owe the kingship to the witches, and that will be a problem. But I feel like what finally stops them is that, like, what is war worth? What is war worth? If Granny Weatherwax can't make a war, she can always make a war, right? People can die for her, and that's easy. That's easy to do. What can you do that doesn't kill people? That's really what I think that question is, right? You're saying Nanny Ogg is the grandmother, and you're right. And I feel like what stops them is how many people am I willing to sacrifice because something is wrong? And I think that's really pertinent to Terry Pratchett's life and growing up. Again, he was born right after wartime, still rationed. He met those people. He saw the troubles in Ireland. Very much so. And he saw the same kind of people do the same question. How hard can I fight? And how many people can die because this is wrong? Yeah. And not like jokey joke die, not like really fucking die for this. Do I want to go to war for this? Because war is easy. If we all stood together and we died like men, it would be for nothing because we would have died. I love that about him. Those kinds of people's revolutions and the very real question of that death is something that's in his books and is so charming. And there are always these little pieces like you're talking about. And I love that so very much.
What I think is another interesting thing that keeps on coming back up is the idea that the previous King Verence did a lot of the same things that Velmet is doing now.
Yeah.
But he did so somewhat less cruelly. Like, he burned down cottages, but he didn't burn them down with people in them, and he would help rebuild them afterwards. It's still burning down cottage, and that's a lot of the humor is based on the fact that, it's still brutal, it's still kingship. But there's a subtle difference in going for the jugular versus
It's this idea that we all understand that kings take their cut and that they are above us and cruel to us. But what are the limits of that?
Yeah.
And how do words interact with that? And how do stories interact with that? You know, he ties that in really wonderfully together, using the fool and the fool's understanding of those things. And understanding that, you know, even Granny doesn't relate to at the beginning of this story.
Yeah.
It's something that only he sees at first in Lancre, and then he shares with Tomjon, his half-brother, which is something that I think is so... It's such a great foreshadowing and relation between them.
Yeah.
That their mother gave them this love of words.
Yeah. Tomjon is a character I find really funny. I like Tomjon a lot.
He is really funny. He's a weird character in this book.
And I like how... Are we going to switch to talking about Tomjon?
Sure. Go ahead. I don't feel like we talked about the Fool enough, but that is A-okay. I think I could do an hour and a half on the Fool alone.
I think the Fool is going to continue to come up when we talk about Magrat, for instance.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Like, there's no way to cleanly separate these characters into their individual sections and say everything we need to say about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're all part of the same story. Their stories are so deeply interconnected.
Yeah, you're totally right. I just want to try and focus on because I think that there's so much to say about each of them.
Yeah, because it just delights me how much of Tomjon's character is based around the three gifts the witches gave him in the beginning. That's so good to me.
Yeah, it is. It's really funny.
And also how the wishes reflect back on the characters themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the most important one is the one that Granny Weatherwax gives him, which is let him be whoever he thinks he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By far.
That is the core to Tomjon's character arc.
And the specific wording of that, too. This book is so good. That specific wording, which can mean both beneficiary in acting and in choosing your own fate, in escaping his kingship, as he does in the end, with Granny's help again.
Yeah.
The phrasing of that is so perfect to allow both those things. You know, as children who didn't think of ourselves as something else, who didn't make believe for a moment that we were king, especially in the middle of a playing troupe. That's delightful, the way he shows that so early on. I love that.
And I like how narrative plays a role so strongly in Tomjon's character arc.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's both, for the bulk of his story up until the end, he's both in control and out of control. Where he both has control but doesn't. Where he is making decisions for his own reasons. At the same time, he is following the script that has been set out for him.
Mm-hmm.
Where he comes to Lancre, where with the crown.
Yeah,
and at the very end,
nightmares about these three witches. Yeah.
So he doesn't connect his journey to Lancre to those nightmares. Those are just weird dreams that he has.
Yeah, but I mean, it is implied that he's going there because they are actively using magic to call him there.
Yeah. Where he's both in control and out of control, where he has reasons to go to Lancre of his own. Mm-hmm. He doesn't, feel any type of desire not to go. And at the very end, he has to actively fight against the role in the narrative that he's given.
Can I say how much I love Terry Pratchett, reinforcing that the people who raise you are your that adoption is legitimate.
Yeah, those are your fucking parents. Those are your parents.
Yeah.
He seems so much like a mini Vitola.
He is. To the final, he reminds us that.
Yeah. And that's... I love Good Omens. That's also something he does in Good Omens, or him and Neil Gaiman do in Good Omens, where, like, it is actively, like, you're not my father if you're showing up late in my life with demands. A lecture or demands. And, like, that's just a great point. Like,
yeah.
You know, blood isn't, like, all that important, honestly, if that's, like, not who has been in your life or, like, been good in your life.
Or at all.
Yeah.
He rejects the rule of blood for kingship and for family. That's the ending of this book. You know, in the final pages, we are reminded, Tomjon, you are Vitalia's son, because we're going to sink in the fucking caravan tonight. And the fool isn't king by blood, but who cares? He knows the role, and he believes it in himself, and that's what truly matters.
And he has, throughout the story, demonstrated that he can rule, and that he knows how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's extremely intelligent.
Well, it's not just intelligent. There are different kinds of intelligence.
Well, he's intelligent and wise. He's both.
He's the right kind of intelligent. Like,
yes. He's somebody who knows how large groups of people work.
Mm-hmm.
Which I really like how Tomjon and the Fool parallel each other in so many ways in this book. Right? Like, Tomjon also understands these things, and Tomjon is also blindingly intelligent and wise. He shows leadership over his troop and over his group. He is still a kid. He still wants to have fun in this world. But we are shown those traits over and over again. And his ultimate act of wisdom, rejecting the kingship because he does not know it, because that is not who he desires to be, it's reflected perfectly. I love those two characters as reflections of each other.
Yeah. And oh boy. I got distracted and lost my line of thought.
That's okay. It is both foreshadowing and foil.
So,
I know what it was. I feel like he takes a lot of the ideas from Tomjon and puts them into Carrot later on.
Oh, that's very interesting.
He is, in a way, like, Carrot is also the man who could be king but rejects it. And who not only could be king, but could be very good at it. Who's extremely charismatic and loves people.
That's true.
Yeah, that's an interesting. You know, we'll have to think about that. Come back to that when we talk about guards.
Yeah,
that's the one, right? That's the one where we figure that out about Carrot.
Yes, but I think it's even more relevant inside of Men at Arms.
Yeah, I don't think it's that much in. Yeah. Oh man, really quick side note. I do find it really like Tomjon's parents are barely like we only see like 2 scenes with them, but it does like quickly show that Terry Pratchett is much better at writing like old married couples than like new romance. Because
I highlighted that section because I liked it a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I really enjoyed that too, and I think you're absolutely right. That once they're married, he understands marriage as a function, as we've talked about. A way to support each other and that kind of commitment, having each other's backs and reflecting each other in marriage is something he understands very well. It's just how to get there he really fucks up.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of which, the Fool and McGrath.
No, I want to read the section because I like it.
Okay, and then we'll get to the Fool and McGrath. I'm ready.
I am ready.
This is told from Granny Weatherwax's point of view. She was an intelligent woman who appeared to treat her husband as much as a sheepdog treats a favorite lamb. The complexities of marital relationship were known to Granny only from a distance, in the same way that an astronomer can view the surface of a remote and alien world. It had already occurred to her that a wife of Vitala would have to be a very special woman with a bottomless reserve of patience and organizational ability and nimble fingers. I just love that description.
I do too. I do too.
And even though she's not in the story, we get so much information about who she is and what their relationship is like.
Yeah.
And it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It fits. It fits especially too with who Vitalia, his name is really hard for me to say, who he becomes as he ages. Something I really liked about this book is that in the time jump, Terry Pratchett made sure to make him feel older. You know, in a way that was really charming to me. You know, he is starting to feel that old age. When we see him, he's kind of rambunctious, honestly. At the beginning, Vitalia, when he takes the child, he really is. He's kind of off the spur. And 15 years later, we see him much more cautious, much more wanting to make a life, wanting to settle down, wanting to build something for Tomjon that matters. And I love that. I love how well Terry Pratchett shows what having a kid did to this man in 15 years.
Yeah, and it's wild how few lines we get about those Tomjon's parents and how well we feel we know them. Like, because it really is like a few paragraphs. And like, I feel like I know them way better than I ever knew fucking Bethan from Color of Magic. Like,
oh my god.
Like,
yeah.
Like there are characters we spent so much time with in these earlier books and didn't know at all. It didn't matter.
Yeah, I didn't.
And then there are these two little side characters. We get a few paragraphs with them, and we feel like we really know them,
and we love them. You know, beyond just knowing them, I feel genuine warmth for Vitalia because Tomjon does too, and because he shows it, and they show it to each other in such a wonderful way.
Because they feel real.
Absolutely.
Like, this is a larger-than-life comedic fantasy story, but it has the ring of truth to it in how it's written.
And that's what would become Terry Pratchett's defining feature, for me at least.
Yeah.
Fuck, I love him so much. Let's talk about the Fool McGrath, you know, so that I stop loving Terry Pratchett so much.
So, The Fool and McGrath bugged me. It did bug me less than previous romances by him, just because they were both sympathetic characters. Like, I think their relationship was a train wreck, but I didn't mind them being paired up as much, just because they were both sweet people in some ways. I don't know. It's kind of a mess.
I would say that
I'm a little curious as to what you two have to say, because I did not actually have strong opinions about The Fool and Magrat either way. Like, whenever I start thinking about it, I start thinking about something else in the story.
It was not as disgusting as any of his other relationships, but for me, and what really struck me about it and why I want to talk about it, is because I felt like it was the most character-breaking thing in the entire book. The way Magrat treats the Fool, for me, was the only part of this book where I was like, why is she doing this? And sometimes it made sense to me. Sometimes she's treating the Fool poorly because she has these duties to the witches, to the fate, to the story. And that is interesting. That can be played well. But sometimes she's kind of doing it just to be a dick.
She's mean to him for no reason a couple times. Like, even, like, where she's, like, playing hard to get, and it just doesn't make sense to her character. Like, and she's a very, like...
She's very sweet. Yeah. She's very sweet, and she's very timid, and she's very nervous. And then suddenly this guy has an interaction with her, and she's like, fuck you, I'm washing my hair. I'm washing my hair for 8 days. I'm washing my hair by the moonlight for the next 14 days. If you give me an apple, fuck you, I will punch you. It's like, whoa, McGrath. Jesus Christ.
That has, I think the thing about that interaction is that it is the most gender thing in the book, where it's one of those things that is there because that's how
like Terry Pratchett finally trying to figure out how people flirt and being like, well, they're mean to each other, right? Oh, well, hey, in Mort, that was flirting too. They're just mean to each other.
Except at least in Mort, it genuinely felt
It's just occurring to me that maybe you guys didn't get the same, like, weird, like, how you're supposed to respond to interest thing that I got growing up. And so now I'm trying to find a way to put that into words.
So here's what I was going to say on that point. Go ahead.
There's this thing culturally where if you're a woman and a man expresses interest in you, you're supposed to play hard to get. Otherwise, where women are told that they have to play hard to get, otherwise their value is decreased or they're viewed as less desirable.
I will agree that is a thing culturally, and that definitely plays into how she was acting.
Well, that is actually the direct explanation that is given in text for why she is responding in this way. Mm-hmm. Like, it's made clear that she reciprocates the interest and wants to go on a date with him. But that, I think it says something along the lines of, Magrat was not very worldly, but she got the impression that you weren't supposed to be too available.
She said, but
that is the direct explanation for given for why she responds to his flirting that way.
Yeah, and I think it just doesn't work. So what the problem for me was, while textually that's what they say for the first time, it doesn't really work after that point. And we are shown explicitly that she is told the opposite by almost everyone around her. Her old mentor, it's specified that she didn't really think of guys like that, and she didn't really pass on that kind of lesson. Nanny's sitting there actively telling her to go get it, girl. Like, have at it. The one part where I really wanted that to work is Granny Weatherwax, and I wanted there to be a kind of dialogue between them. Granny Weatherwax enforcing those gender roles, and McGrath responding to them because she genuinely does look up to Granny Weatherwax. In the end, though, we didn't really get that. While Granny Weatherwax does specify that she thinks it's foolish and that there's no reason to date and that's kind of not for her, she doesn't really enforce those things for McGrath. And McGrath's been away from general society for all her life now.
I do agree that it doesn't work. But I also think it would be, like, out of character, even for Granny Weatherwax. I know this sounds weird because Granny Weatherwax is very much the socially conservative gender roles person, but she also makes it, like, pretty clear that she views all romantic relationships for women, for witches to be foolish or somewhat unacceptable by her own standards.
Yeah, that's the slut-shaming Granny Ogg.
You slut-shame Natty.
Well, kind of.
Jail. Jail for 1,000 years. Anyways, I think you're right that I'm glad he didn't go that way, because I do agree. I think it would have been out of character for Granny. But then the option is, why the fuck is she doing this? The real option would have been, don't have her act like that. If you don't want her to date and you want the fool to be chasing after her, well, McGrath is shy and nervous and too sweet. It is easy to make that be hard to get just by her nature. And I think that
it's worth it.
Was
it's worth noting that there is a in-story other reason for them to conflict, which is the fact that Fool is actively aiding Velmet, and Velmet he's basically kind of waging a kind of war on the witches.
Which comes up later, for sure.
Yeah.
Which also, like, if someone who knows how to write romance would have made that specifically the conflict.
And it wasn't.
Yeah, that should have been the core conflict.
It was like a mild annoyance.
Know how to write romance.
It was like a mild annoyance for her. It was insane.
Yeah, that was really, that's really what it is if Terry Pratchett knew how to write romance, that would have been the conflict.
Yeah. I felt very uninvested in the Fool and McGrath getting together by the end, because at the end I was like, Fool, I'm gonna be real, you deserve better. You deserve better. Like, McGrath kind of treat you like shit, man. She never want to go on dates with you. She literally used you for espionage and dipped after not having seen in years.
Wait.
Not years. In fake years. In fake years. I should be more clear. In false years, which were not years for him. But he does go on a trip and he'd come back later, and she's like, so when's the play? What's going on? Okay, bye. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to wait here for you. Please come on a date.
The reason why she did that was because she was fucking pissed. The play was specifically anti-witch propaganda. Just to be clear, if
I know, but she wasn't treating him like it was. She wasn't going to him like, I'm pissed at you. Fucking tell me when the play is, you stupid shit. Like, that wasn't what she was doing. She was still playing like they were dating or whatever, and that like it was like fine. And it was weird. Like, I get her being angry. I would like her to be angry.
I agree that it is weirdly written, but it's worth noting that after that initial playing hard to get thing, all of the other things where she gets mad at the Fool are based around the fact that he is actively working with somebody who is trying to fuck her up.
Then stop seeing him. Like, yeah, that was the thing. She was still treating him like shit, and they still kind of are together at the end.
Yeah, I agree that is weirdly written, but it's also worth noting that...
and not all of it. When she's planning the time jump, she, again, treats him poorly. And that's not part of the hard to get. She just does that.
Can you describe that scene to me? Because I'm not sure that I remember it.
That was the scene where she's getting information from him the first time around, where he's still on the fence. Like, he's kind of cooperating with the king, but he's still being like, no, I'm trying to push him away from the bad shit. I'm trying to do this and this and this. And I can't tell you because wink wonk. And she's like totally out of it, totally distracted, trying to plan this time jump. And then like, he's like, so you want to go on a date? And she like runs off. it just felt really awkward.
In text, I do agree that it's awkwardly written, but the in-text reason for her running off is because she's mad he's working with Velmet.
I thought it was just because she was like...
No, it wasn't.
I didn't read it.
Yeah.
I didn't read it that way at all. Like, it was just because she was distracted and doing her own shit. Like, to do this, but like, she wasn't mad at him. He'd just given her the information she wanted.
She wasn't at all mad. She wasn't expressed to be mad in that scene.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm misremembering it then.
There are scenes later where she storms off. And
there are scenes where she is mad, but that wasn't one of them.
That wasn't one of them at all. She's just so wrapped up in her own shit that she kind of treats him poorly. And there's, again, just like no justification for them to be together. So they keep doing this thing where like the Fool is desperately chasing him, and there's no justification for them to be together at all. It's not like they have a pre-existing relationship of any kind whatsoever. Not like,
it's kind of funny because there is a justification given, and it's that they're basically the first man and woman that of marriageable age that each other has seen. It's kind of surprising. It's kind of funny because that is the justification been for so many relationships and courtships inside of these early Discworld books.
It's whack. It's mad whack.
It feels
so
like
whack.
an obligatory it feels like it's there because there needs to be a romantic subplot. Like, it does not feel natural for either of the characters, and it's not really memorable. Mm-hmm. I do think it's a lot better than the previous romantic subplots.
Is that because they're not married at the end of the book?
And they're engaged characters. They're each characters.
They have the same age?
Yes.
I think it's the age appropriateness and the fact that they're both characters I like and think are good.
Yeah, I just don't think they deserve each other in the worst way. I don't know. For me, it's still, even after talking with you, it still felt like a completely character breaking for McGrath to act like that so consistently. It feels like a very different woman than she is in every other scene. And not in the nice way that romance can often reveal a different side of us. In a completely not nice where I'm like, who is this woman? Where did she come from?
I actually kind of wish she were, like, madder. I wish she were angrier.
Yeah, no, that would have, that would have made sense. That isn't what was written.
Yeah, like, I wish she was angry about the stuff she should actually be angry about instead of just being a dick. Like, for no reason. Like, she could have been a dick because of real things. Instead, he made her be a dick for no reason.
I would have been real mad.
Yeah. He can't write it that way because he needs her to get that information. I don't know why he isn't just like, then they looked in the crystal ball and saw that the play was at 8 because they can do that explicitly. But whatever.
Yeah.
Fuck do I know?
Man.
Like, he puts into the book the fact that the crystal ball doesn't get sound. Merely so, Magrat can justify having a conversation with the fool. Instead of just being like, hey, you've been spreading rumors about witches, which is getting my friends nearly actually killed. Well, it would if they weren't witches. That sucks. I'm not going to talk to you if you do that. Instead, he has to justify that whole fucking thing by doing that.
Yeah.
Man.
Oh, man. Can I talk about how much I love that scene with Granny Weatherwax? Well, no, where Granny Weatherwax is knocked into a ditch by a cart driver.
Oh my god, yes. Yes.
That was such an amazing scene. That was so perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, when Granny learns that she no longer has respect, it's by a cart driver not moving the cart around her. The description both of that thing and of Macbeth witnessing it. Macbeth being like, well, Granny had simply never thought about anybody else for quite a long time. Because she demanded that kind of respect, and she got it. Because she earned it. Because words were on her side. And Granny being so furious at that, Magrat being so surprised that she didn't even look. Like, she's such a witch. She's so in her ways. She doesn't even think to step aside. Oh, mastery. And
I also love how like sly it is that this is the straw that breaks the camel back. It's not Nanny getting locked in the dungeon and kidnapped.
It's the lack of respect.
If you ain't got respect, you ain't got nothing. Absolutely. Nothing else is what tips her over. It's that single thing. Because she doesn't care about kings. Kings come and go. They are not important. The people that they rule are what determine the story, repeatedly and over. And this is just another way that they show that. Granny doesn't care about the king. Granny doesn't care about the cards or the tax collectors or any of that. What she cares about is that the people she is here to work for, the people she helps, don't respect her anymore. And what is the point if you do not have the respect of the people you work for? I love that.
And it's also so perfect the fact that this is reinforced throughout the story. For instance, there's the very beginning scene where they get the baby and they see treachery and backstabbing, and they note that the nanny notes that they both wear the same badge of King Verence. And Granny Weatherwax asks, well, who's he? And Magrat says he rules the country. And Granny's like, oh, that king.
Yeah?
Yeah, she does not.
It just does not matter.
Does not matter to her.
Yeah. And which, again, is a reflection of that Shakespearean take. You know, Shakespeare often told those stories of England through the eyes of its kings and knights. And that is a lasting cultural perspective now. We think of England as its kings and knights. And I love that rejection of that thought in this work. I mean, it is, again, that recontextualization of these grand stories as stories of the little people. And the recontextualization, again, for our modern eyes.
And it's so perfect that throughout the story, Terry Pratchett continuously emphasizes that the people do not care whether or not Velmet killed the king until he makes them care, until he makes it their business.
Yeah.
And until it's in the play.
Yeah, because the way you tell history matters.
And because the playwright
really
controlled that history. Specifically, because William Shakespeare controlled the history of kings. And he wrote them down, and he made us believe in a different type of king. I think that is so critical to the story, that this was not true, and the people did not care until it was in the play.
And he mentions that they know on a logical level it is not true because they were there. But the reality that is shown to them in the play is so much more vivid and so much more real than the actual reality that they lived.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is further reinforced by Death's appearance in the play. This is something I really love, this little touch you put in. The play is more real than real life because we can accept things that we are uncomfortable with. You would think, he says, that a play would reflect differences in our lives, a different world. But really what it shows is deeper truths about those things, more disgusting natures of man. He says that explicitly, and I love that. He's pointing it out not only in the characters talking about it, but in the characters being able to see death. Someone nobody in that area would normally be able to see. And
he talks about
wonderful.
Death specifically says something along the lines of people talk about how they go to the theater to escape their lives, to escape ugly reality. But then, in fact, they go to see all of the horrible things in life reflected back at them, and they love it. Mm-hmm. And yeah. Sorry.
No, absolutely. That's the line I was talking about, and you're so right. It's yeah. It's just a little touch for character. It doesn't have a greater story meaning. I do really love that Death trips over his lines.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
it's an amazing scene.
He makes fun of the actor who he takes the place of, and then he does it himself, which is just cute. It's just a nice thing to throw in there. It doesn't have any grander effect.
Man.
And I also really like how Hewell the dwarf and the playwright, who is basically William Shakespeare, the genius playwright, is continuously struggling with this story that he is hired to write, this play. Is it just feels wrong, and no matter how hard he tinkles he tinkers with it, it continues to be wrong. Even as every individual scene is polished and crafted, it just continuously feels wrong because it's the wrong way around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of like the idea that you can try and rewrite reality, but reality also rewrites fiction and snaps back into place. I don't know. It's one of those things that I really like narratively. And
yeah. I mean, this is his first real touch, I feel, at what would become the greatest theme of the witches. Story, narrative, and fate. You know, what it means to be those characters. What it means to be, that comedy dell'arte, the tropes, that we become, the pre-written characters, the child who is rightful heir to the throne, who will of course come into the crown, the fool who is intelligent and witty, who advises the king at all at all points, the mad dictator driven by grief and foolishness. Again, it is the absolute first performance that we get to see from him doing those witches concepts that would become absolutely integral not only to his witches books but to all of his works.
And I think it's like probably when I've been reading Terry Pratchett since I was like maybe 6 years old, and I think of the things in his books, that is the theme that had the largest impact in how I see the world, how he approaches stories, and how stories reflect and alter reality.
Yeah, it's one of his hugest ideas behind his books. And like, it's fascinating, and it's really a reflection of reality, because we live in a world where history is so often rewritten in favor of the party that comes out on top. And like, reality is constantly rewritten in ways that will favor certain people. And like,
not just history, but the present.
Yeah. And I mean, history as it's made, you know, like
everything
is rewritten to favor different sides. And like, the way stories are presented, like when I see kids media that I like, I'm so relieved, or like that I want kids to be experiencing. I'm so relieved that those perceptions are being put out instead of a lot of different perceptions or like media that was put out when I was a kid. That, but then like, I mean, it just changes everything. Like stories change everything. They're a reflection of a culture, and they're also an enforcement of how culture is going to be. Like, I don't know. It's very, very interesting. And
yeah.
I really love this book.
I think
so much.
It's not always that history is written to favor the winning party. A lot of times, history is written to fit stories.
Yeah.
And sometimes those are the same thing. But it's also worth noting that when we talk about the Vikings, almost all traditional histories of the Vikings are written from the perspective of the people that they defeated and plundered. I couldn't hear you. Yeah. And people write their own life stories to fit narratives or stories. People write themselves as the heroes of their own stories and frequently perceive reality as they experience it as narratives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think something that's very interesting in talking about this subject is that Americans in general are much more willing to agree with the statement that history is written by the winners and for the winning party, partially because our history is so short and we've seen it happen very, very quickly. And a lot of the perspective that he was talking about, he's talking about much older history that has been rewritten, as you're speaking about, for the story of it, for the beauty of what could be told from a person's life. It doesn't matter what the person did. Yeah. Well, yeah, beauty, stories, same thing as aesthetic.
Every king of England has been rewritten to fit stories and are rewritten to make better stories.
Absolutely. I think that we should finish up. What is the last thing that you want to talk about?
Before we
I want to be Nanny Ogg when I grow up. Just not talking about that at all. I just want to say that. I want to be Nanny Ogg when I grow up.
We should do a quick piece about Granny and where she's come from since Equal Rights and who she is in this book.
Oh God. Before we finish up, can we take a break? I need to pee. And also, I don't think we're as close to done as you think we are.
I am as close to
I haven't talked about the Forest and Macbeth yet.
Okay, we've got 2 more sections to do. Go pee real quick, and then we'll push through it.
Okay.
I'll you guys have still been cutting out, so I'll get some fun new content when I listen through this.
Oh, Pog, finally you'll have a way to we have to make this content when she's gone. We have to make it potentially usable, potentially funny.
Yeah.
Can you be funny for me, Mulch?
No.
Do a little hat dance. What have you learned from the Fool? Tell me one of the 55 prescribed jokes.
I don't remember them at all.
Dance for me, Fool!
I can't even, I read those and just did not comprehend them at all.
I'm gonna Amazon ship you a little Fool sound.
Thanks. I have always wanted to. I've always been attracted to fools.
To fools, I love the Fool so much. It's crazy to me. I've never read this book before because one of the things I really connect with myself is the imagery of the Fool. It's fascinating to me. I never read this book, even though it has a Fool as the main character. I've done that since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it's surprising me that this book is not the reason why, because he does it so well in this.
Yeah, and I've never read this book, and this book would have, forms so many of the concepts that have been,
burned into
shaped
your soul.
My life.
Yeah.
Yeah. This book, if I had read this as a kid, I would say, well, that's where I first got these things. I didn't get them from here because I didn't read them, but they're so ingrained in me, as important things that it's wild to read this book.
It is. It is one of the greatest examples we've seen so far of early philosophy from Terry Pratchett. Philosophy that made us in a really wild way. And that's why this book club is so special to all of us, is because we are the people we are today. Because of the books that Terry Pratchett wrote. Because of the philosophy and the commitment to it that he had. And it's really incredible to come back to it as a young adult and see who I've become in the face of those things, and how Terry Pratchett himself developed into his grander adulthood in these books. I'm excited, hopefully, to one day do another book club with you guys again.
I'm.
When we're goddamn 50, and
your Nanny Ogg.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be Nanny Ogg.
I'm pretty hyped to be kind of an old lady witchy figure. I think it's really the best.
Yeah. Oh, but I'll also get to keep my teeth because Ingo is making me go to the dentist.
I know you should tell Ingo that it kind of doesn't work for your future plans if you have teeth. Because you want to be Nanny Ogg. I mean, why is Ingo stopping you from living your dreams?
I couldn't tell you.
You gotta ask. You gotta ask. Anyways, I'm proud of us. We said something funny. And
we did.
Insightful.
Yeah. We're very entertaining.
We're killer. And you should put this at the start of the podcast.
Okay. Oh yeah, I'll finally have one where I have
an opener.
Intro and an opener and a ending. I'm sure I can squeak an ending out of here.
I mean, we could probably do something beyond a welcome as our cold open, but yeah.
I'm so glad the editing program I got lets me just take out sections, because I had this movie editor before, like what I do for the putting the pictures in when I do the videos, and that doesn't let you just highlight sections and cut them, which is annoying.
Oh, that is awful.
I'm so glad. Like, I'd have to put a whole nother copy of the full recording and then cut it to the point I wanted, and then cut both of them so that they'd go together.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I was living like an animal.
I will buy you some audio editing software if you need it, bro.
It's okay. It's okay.
I got your back. Is Michi back?
Yes, I am. Sorry, just bringing up my Macbeth notes.
Oh my god.
So, let's talk about Granny Weatherwax.
Yeah, because she is so much more wonderful in this one. She really is.
So good.
You
know how you guys kept on talking about during Equal Rights, and I kept on going, well, I love Granny Weatherwax. She's one of my favorite characters. I don't know that it's this Granny Weatherwax from Equal Rights, or because I've read so many books with Granny Weatherwax. This is what I'm talking about. This Granny Weatherwax is so good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the difference between this and Equal Rights is that we get Granny being more honest with the person she's speaking to. Because in a lot of ways, she's still doing the exact same things. She's constantly reinforcing these gender roles. She's constantly talking about how she's above them, but still reinforcing them, but still reinforcing them, but still doing this, still doing that. And the difference, the what makes her so much more wonderful is that she's honest with us, the reader, and with McGrath. You know, and she's much more that character of the old British lady who, doesn't really give a shit about this because I grew up in wartime and I'm fucking tough as nails, and who gives a shit about men? They're all gone. You know, I think that she really evolves into that in this, because she just wasn't that great in Equal Rights. She felt so unnatural with the child, which she was supposed to, but it gave us a very limited window into her character, into her person. But this is her in her natural environment, doing what she's supposed to be doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. It works great. Everything about her stubbornness, her strong will, it makes this woman who feels so real. I think by far the most honest woman he writes for a very, very long time.
And I think there's also this other thing where she bends the world to fit her.
Yeah.
She's completely in situations where she if she were somebody else, she would feel uncomfortable or out of place. She just goes and kicks the teeth out of those situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's that tough as nails. I grew up in wartime type identity.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit.
For instance,
it's really
there's
the
a
thing.
scene where she goes to see a play for the first time, and she has no idea what a play is. But instead of feeling awkward or uncomfortable or trying to figure things out, she becomes part of the play or part of the entertainment in a way.
She forces herself aggressively and rudely and harshly into it. It's almost embarrassing for us as the reader because we understand, but Granny doesn't care. She doesn't need to figure it out. She doesn't feel that same urge we do.
And in a way, Nanny Ogg is exactly the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Nanny Ogg has that same sort of tough, bend the world to fit you kind of thing that Granny does. Whereas where Granny goes about it by sort of kicking things into the shape she wants them, Nanny Ogg just sort of
rolls with it.
Well, I would say she sort of rolls into a situation and does what she would otherwise be doing no matter what the situation is.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like Nanny's happily drifting along, regardless of whether she understands it or not, and she doesn't really care whether she does.
But I think there's a distinction where drifting along implies that she is going along with the forces or with the situation, which is not the case. She's just it's sort of like she has a destination that she is headed to, or a thing that she is going to be doing, and she is going to be doing that thing no matter what is happening around her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She has these particular things that she likes doing, and she is going to do these things.
Yeah, and that is, I think, absolutely. And she's just not... It's the difference... Well, the reason I say drifting along, it's the difference between forcing, right? Both these women choose what they're going to do and just do it, right? That's critical and central to their core. What I mean by drifting along is that in comparison to Granny Weatherwax's iron hard will forcing it, Nanny, Jesus Christ, Ogg runs into those things and chooses what will be best for her and happiest, specifically happiest for her in that situation. Yeah, if they're headed to the theater, then she's going to have some... What was she eating? Nuts?
Humbugs, I think it was. Boiled humbugs.
I don't know what that is.
They're peppermints, basically. Peppermints, but British.
Oh my god, they're so dramatic.
Again, we all want to be living Nanny Ogg's life because she is truly the happiest out of anyone in this book. Yeah. She has made her life what she wants it to be. And
I am never going to be Nanny Ogg at any point in my life.
I mean, maybe you'll fix your anxiety.
I have a more steel-toed boots approach to things.
Yeah.
I think...
But, Nanny Ogg's method really, she does what she wants to do, and she bases her, it is her own happiness is part of that equation, which I don't think that's true for Granny Weatherwax in a lot of ways. Granny Weatherwax makes situations what she wants them to be, but it's just not the same thing.
Granny does what needs to be done.
I think Granny Weatherwax would look at you funny if you implied that her happiness was part of the equation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because in a way she likes being unhappy.
Yeah.
Something that kind of gives her a weird catharsis or sense of vindication, and she thinks it gives her power. Which in a way, it does.
Yeah. It's very clear to me why these are the best women he's ever written. both Granny Weatherwax and Nanny Ogg are examinations of the wartime women that were all around him. Both that hard-nosed, I will do what needs to be done. The country needs me. I need to survive this. That's Granny Weatherwax, not factoring in her happiness, doing what needs to be done. And Nanny Ogg, who, you know, that wartime woman who understood what makes life good now and celebrating in that. Those who are able to grow past the war and those who are still stuck in it many, many years later. For better or for worse, for both of them. They're still changed by those experiences irrevocably and should be. But it's exactly... I think it's such a wonderful examination of those, because even though in a lot of moments these women do things that are kind of frustrating or angering or even disgusting, it's like he loves them so much. They are the matriarchs of this village and of Terry Pratchett himself and of the whole area. And he paints that with such love that the witches, fundamentally, as we see them, are so often wartime women, is incredible and heartening. And it makes what their role is in those communities so much more understandable. It's hard for me to imagine his witches as being anything else.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
So what about Magrat?
Yeah.
Magrat is the one I have the least strong impression of.
I think Magrat's very interesting because if, you know, we're keeping pace with that, she's a representation of the women who came after, who don't know that life. I mean, right? If you had a wartime woman as your mother, you grew up in the 60s and 70s, a time of wealth and ideas of beautiful capitalism, assuming you were on the right side of the country. You know, those are the women that Terry Pratchett knew.
You're right.
Growing up and how he see them interacting with each other. She is bright.
Magrat is a very 1960s, 1970s lady.
Absolutely. She's obsessed with occult jewelry. She's obsessed with how things used to be before this and all these traditions that are really important to her. And she's fascinated. It's almost like she doesn't believe. She just really likes the look of it. And her interactions.
I also think that's kind of unfair because she's also somebody who cares very deeply about doing the right thing and about.
Absolutely. I love Macbeth. I don't mean to speak against her. She's a deeply
compassionate and empathetic person.
She's so sweet. She's so kind, except when she's talking to the fool. You know, she is great. And it's a reflection of that, right? I think it is absolutely a reflection of coming out of wartime and being able to care about others again, being able to be soft, to be, you know, passionate about these old traditions and this fancy jewelry, this stuff that does not matter to Granny Weatherwax at all. And, you know, Nanny Ogg sees as not truly happiness. If there's another way of saying that, there probably is. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all reflections of those generations. The witches are perfect in that way.
Yes.
God, I remember the milk jug that she'd like carefully glued back together and loved, and then Nanny just like threw it through the portal to
because to Granny it's completely insane to do that. It's a milk jug. Who gives a shit? Throw it. You know, and it's the same when Granny and Nanny get together to summon that demon, and McGrath's like, well, no, you need this and this, and they're like, no, we make it work our way. If we got some soap flakes, it's some fucking soap flakes, okay? You know, it's a wonderful example of that, right? I love that perspective that the witches get to be these whole generations.
At the same time, Magrat does do modifications for traditional spells.
Oh, absolutely.
Just by
but
herself.
All of her modifications are. She has a very strong emphasis on animal cruelty. On why would I use Eye of Newt when I could use this more humane alternative, tapioca?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah.
And I love that touch when thinking about them as these generations, right? She's an absolute hippie.
Yeah.
And at times, the
what kind of
hard-nosed
barbarian would use Eye of Newt?
I know.
Granny Weatherwax looks away.
Yeah, and the way they draw the clash, both the clash and the respect that Granny and McGrath have for each other is phenomenal. I mean,
yeah,
because of course those generations are going to clash. Their worlds are so vastly different. You know, Granny can't understand why McGrath's doing this, not truly, but she, accepts it. And at times shows that she loves it in her hard-nosed way. Because what else would she have been fighting for, honestly?
Yeah.
Except to get a fucking little silly with it. And Granny gets shown that by Nanny's behavior too, right? Granny is definitely swayed in her opinion on McGrath because of Nanny. And how those two interact with each other. And again, that trauma of wartime. How you come out of it. And who you are in the face of that. It's wonderfully examined in Nanny Ogg delighting in happiness and pushing her hard-nosed friend who's, harsh because of it, to be happier, to take those moments, to take pride in her work, especially, reaching in and being like, you could be as good as Black Alice. You are.
Oh, yeah.
10 times greater. And McGrath is too. And God, I love that so much. The companionship that these women share, and both as individual characters and as representations of generations, is so kindly and so loving.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for the future Witches books.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for Witches Abroad. I know you don't like Lords and Ladies, but I like Lords and Ladies. And so I'm excited to talk about that one. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I love these characters so much.
I do too.
I think these are probably my favorite characters in Terry Pratchett books generally. And keep in mind that, I also love the Watch books.
Yeah.
And I love... God...
I know, it's interesting hearing what you guys learned the most from these books as well, because I think it's really different from what I learned. I like that a lot. Meta-narratives and the impact of stories is definitely something I encountered in Terry Pratchett books, but it's not what I consider the greatest lessons I learned from him. What I see in these works is the unfortunate cruelty of common men, and the unfortunate kindness of common men. The way that we get to be hurting or confused and still look out for each other. The way we get to be hurting and confused and still hurt each other and try again.
I'm really excited for Amazing Maurice because I think both of those elements play major roles in that story.
Yeah. The common man, the beauty of him and the compassion of him, that's what I took away the most from Terry Pratchett books. And you, I think, see it a lot in this. He really does think of the world like that, of being from the bottom up. And him writing that, him believing that. I mean, that's what affected me the most. That's what helped me understand the beauty in working for your neighbor, in doing the type of social justice that I spend a lot of my life doing and still do. Obviously those things were in me before that, right? My mom always had us do that kind of work, but he gave me the words to talk about it, the ways to understand it, even in adversity, because I think a lot of people get pushed into doing that kind of social work and then don't recognize the beauty of it. They think of it as like Granny Weatherwax would, something that needs to be done, but
doesn't have joy in it, doesn't have beauty in it. And that's wrong. And he shows us that's wrong. He shows us how beautiful we are in not being heroes, in just being people, doing our best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's also a big thing inside of the Watch books.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Man,
It's wonderful. I love Terry Pratchett.
I love Terry Pratchett.
I love Terry Pratchett so much, guys. It's insane.
That feels a lot like a conclusion to the episode.
Yeah, I mean...
That feels like it should be the ending. At the same time, I do want to talk about the fucking trees.
What about the tree? Tell us about the trees.
Go. Tell us about the trees.
So in Macbeth, one of the key things, I think his second interaction with the three witches, he demands to know his future. And they tell him, Macbeth shall not be vanquished until Great Burnham Wood to High Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. Which he interprets to mean that, hey, I'm never going to be vanquished because there's no fucking way that the trees are going to come here and fight me.
Mm-hmm.
And in Macbeth is vanquished after the kingdom to which his opponents have fled come and attack him and cut down the trees of Birmingham Wood, and use them to mask their troop movements, so it appears from afar as though this giant forest is coming.
Yeah.
To Dunsinane. And in the Wyrd Sisters, the kingdom, the trees literally turn against Velmet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the witches are pushed to move by the personification, by the kingdom as personified by its wildlife.
The kingdom itself knew that he hated it. That is, it is a great show of that. It's funny to think about him writing that in the 90s.
It is so clever.
It is.
And,
I found that kingdom stuff very interesting, that it's not how he treats the people. It's not whether he's good or evil. It's whether he cares about the kingdom or cares for it.
Yeah.
Like,
again, it's that cruel response to those capitalist kings in power, right? That he very really experienced in the height of, ecological thought and anti-global warming stuff, and it's it's weird because the kingdom absolutely provides a thrust, and they talk about the trees a lot, but as they appear as a character is very little, which is perfectly fitting because they cry out to those women, listen, we are lost with this king. You must act against him, or I will, or we will all fall. That is such a great way to present that argument. That is such a great way, again, those generations being presented that option. Those people being presented that option in the face of Thatcherites, in the face of excess and wealth and Britain's vast history of not giving a shit about the weather outside as long as they can make their fucking money. Because nowhere is the class divide nowhere in the Western world is the class divide as clearly written and clearly destructive as it is in England. They can't question it, which is something that he gets to in this book.
right? The kings are not questioned to be there. It's questioned how much destruction they will do to us.
Yeah.
And the kingdom is a reflection of that. That point which is too far. It does not matter if you do not care about the people. But if you do not care about the kingdom itself, we will all fall. I really liked that. I'm glad that we do get to talk about it.
Yeah. Also, it's just really fucking funny.
Yeah, it is. I think that it culminates so perfectly, too. Lady Velmet ends her story by escaping the prison, which she is gently and respectfully put into instead of just being fucking killed on the spot. You know, with no gratefulness in her heart, she escapes. She calls them weak and foolish, and she runs into the forest, and it kills her. It happily kills her. And, you know, to her last, she's screaming in defiance of it. She's trying to bargain with the land. There is no bargaining with it. There are no half measures.
She's not even trying to bargain with it. She just charges in with a knife.
It's so funny. Yeah. You know, she has no respect for it. To the last, to her death, she sees ecological thought as weakness, foolishness, something beneath her, beneath rule.
Yeah.
I think that is a perfect culmination of the kingdom and what he's saying with it. I think that there's so much to be said with it, and it is a wonderful inversion of the Macbeth story.
Yes. Oh, boy. So I think it's going to be very easy for us to rank this.
Yeah, best book. Easy.
Find that out.
Best book.
I actually already wrote it down maybe 2 weeks ago and saved it. I'm not even going to open it right now because I already know I put in Wyrd Sisters as the best book.
Yeah. It's just...
It's not even a fucking question. It's head and shoulders above.
Very obviously so great.
Yeah. Yeah.
God. I think it helped. I mean, this is his first wonderful book, and it is a retelling of a story. So I do think it helped that he had that, like, structure of a plot going in. Like, just as the early writer, like...
I mean...
Yeah.
It is very clearly Macbeth, but it's also worth noting that as far as actual plot structure goes, he takes very little of this plot structure itself.
It's interesting because it's Macbeth at first. Again, I think that this is one of those stories that evolved a lot while he was writing about it. It's Macbeth at first. It very quickly diverges away. He uses the rest of Macbeth to wrap it up, but in the middle, it's far more Hamlet. And, you know, beyond that, we spend time in Ankh-Morpork, and it's nothing except him talking about Shakespeare. And showing Shakespeare getting fucking drunk because he's just a dude.
Yeah.
And getting into a bar fight because of racism. I do really appreciate how he started laying down the groundwork for some of the problems that we would later talk about and interact with in other Ankh-Morpork books.
Yeah.
I really feel that this is him starting... You know, he's really beginning to think of Ankh-Morpork as a setting to use, and he starts to use it here in a way that feels very natural and very, very close to what we see in later Watch books. I'm really, really excited to get to a single fucking book that takes place there.
I'm pretty sure it's like book after next.
One day. One day.
It would also... It doesn't even... It only kind of starts as Macbeth, structurally. Like,
yeah, it's more conceptually.
A good portion of the beginning... A good portion of Macbeth, the play, takes place before the murder. And it's people... It's basically the Macbeths kind of struggling with the idea and finally making that decision and basically kind of pushing themselves into it.
Yeah.
Whereas, so I don't Wyrd Sisters does not owe much of its structure to Macbeth.
Yeah.
I do think it's more like a launching off point.
Yeah.
The idea of Macbeth.
Yeah. And he just does such a good job of it.
He does. This book is so memorable and so powerful that after reading it, I just kind of assumed from then on out that Macbeth in the play was the one who is washing his hands of blood. Like, I just kind of assumed that.
Yeah.
Despite all of the cultural... It rewrote a bunch of cultural osmosis.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I think we should sign off.
Do we have an official sign-off, or do we just sort of meander off?
Sort of fuck off, yeah.
I mean, do you have something funny to say?
No, absolutely not.
What a great sign-off.
Alright, bye.
Okay.
Bye, listeners. Sing the Goodnight Moon song.
Oh, I missed the Goodnight Moon song.
I do too.
I am not familiar with it, so one of you should sing it.
I can't sing it. I don't remember things from childhood.
I was about to say, are you insane? But it's from the bear. It's from the bear in the book Blue House. He sings to the moon goodnight, and that's how they end the episodes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I never watched that.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Okay, goodbye, listener. I'm going to end the recording.
Okay, you are recording?
I am now recording.
Okay. Fuck, shit. I can do this.
Do a countdown first. Count yourself in.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Hello? Fuck, shit. I get stage fright.
I think we should leave all of these in.
Oh, you're an actor.
I haven't been an actor in a long-ass time.